15 years is a long time. 15 years in which I built a life, a family, and a version of myself I thought was safe from the chaos of the past. 15 years since I first discovered the truth. Since the night I found out my wife had been entangled with a man she should never have been near, a man who was married, a man whose presence in her life shattered everything I thought I knew about trust. Back then, I was young, naive, and hopelessly in love. I had thought our bond was unbreakable, that love alone could shield us from mistakes, from choices made in moments of weakness. I was wrong. I remember the day vividly. It was raining, the kind of relentless drizzle that blurs the edges of the world and yet sharpens every thought. I had walked into the apartment, expecting the warmth of her smile, the softness of familiarity, and instead I found a note, a confession she had left in the quiet hours before I arrived. The words were simple, almost casual, but they carried the weight of betrayal. She had slept with him. She had chosen him, at least for that period of time. I felt my chest tighten, a pressure that made it hard to breathe, a sting that refused to fade even as the days turned into weeks. In the years that followed, we tried. Therapy, apologies, conversations that spiraled into endless loops of blame and regret. I rebuilt myself, focusing on the part of life she hadn't touched, the job, the friendships, the small victories that reminded me I still had worth. I buried the memory deep, the anger and heartbreak wrapped in layers of carefully constructed distance. And I believed, for a long time, that the past had stayed in its place, that she had stayed in hers. Until now, I saw her first in a crowded cafe downtown. She hadn't noticed me at first, the same delicate poise she carried 15 years ago, though softened by time. She looked different, older, maybe wiser, but the flicker of that old audacity lingered in her eyes. I froze. My mind raced, and for a brief, disorienting moment, I felt the old surge of longing, the pull that had first drawn me to her, to the laughter, to the chaos that had once seemed intoxicating. But then I remembered. I remembered the nights of sleepless rage, the mornings I cried alone, the years spent rebuilding a life she had once fractured. She approached me slowly, a cautious smile tugging at her lips, as though she feared the shadow of what she had done. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice soft but deliberate. That question carried the same weight as her confession all those years ago. It was an invitation, but also a test, a chance for her to measure the man I had become against the man she had left behind. We sat across from each other, and the conversation began carefully, each sentence measured, each pause loaded with the tension of history. She spoke of regret, of time spent thinking, of mistakes she wished she could undo. And I listened. I listened to words, but I felt them differently now. 15 years had taught me patience, caution, and the value of silence. I understood her remorse, but I also understood the irreversibility of her actions. Then came the revelation that shifted the room entirely. She wasn't here for closure, or to apologize. Not really. She was here because of him, or rather, because of what remained unresolved from that affair, a complication she had carried silently for years. Her presence threatened to dismantle the carefully constructed life I had built since that night. The tension in the cafe thickened. My hands clenched around the cup, as though holding on to something tangible could anchor me against the storm she had quietly summoned. I wanted to speak, to remind her of the man I had become, of the life we had survived without each other, but the words lodged somewhere between memory and restraint. She spoke of what she had done, the choices that had shaped her path, and the consequences she had never anticipated. I could see the desperation behind the apology, the lingering attachment to a past that no longer existed for me. My heart raced, a strange mixture of old affection and sharp, protective instinct. I realized with a jolt that the power in this encounter was hers, but only if I allowed it. I left the cafe that day feeling a storm of emotions I hadn't anticipated. Anger, sorrow, a strange flicker of nostalgia, but most importantly, clarity. I had survived her absence. I had built a life in spite of her choices, and no confession, no return could undo that. 15 years had taught me that some wounds heal not by forgiveness, but by distance, by strength, by refusing to let someone else dictate your peace. She had returned, yes, but the man she found was not the same boy who had once loved her blindly. The man she found was measured, deliberate, and unyielding.